Did you know your credit card points and miles can lose value to inflation? Credit card companies often reduce the redemption value of your points and miles. Now, imagine a credit card with rewards that can grow in value. With the Gemini credit card, you can earn Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos instantly with no annual fee. Every swipe at the store or gas pump earns you instant rewards deposited straight to your account. Plus, sign up now for a $200 Bitcoin bonus to kickstart your rewards. Visit Gemini.com/card today. Check out the link in the description for more information on rates and fees. Again, if you're looking to invest in Bitcoin but don't know where to start, the Gemini credit card makes it easy.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Hey, warm and fuzzy hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSIN family of podcasts. We've got an absolutely excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined in a few minutes by one of our good friends, Ben Wilson. You know that he does a lot of great work in terms of his play-by-play work when it comes to college basketball season. He does great work over at VSIN as a little bit of a do-it-all utility man on a lot of our live betting shows and so much more. We're going to be chatting with him a little bit about the fallout that we're seeing right now with Tarleton State putting Billy Gillespie on administrative leave, as I know that he is very hard at work taking a look at the WAC because he calls a lot of those games. He oftentimes does their conference tournament out here in lovely Las Vegas, so we'll talk about that. He, much like myself, a man from the great state of Wisconsin, so we're going to be chatting with him a little bit about the Big Ten. Jackson Shell said he suffers a pretty big injury for the Oregon Ducks, so we have to take a look at that. What are the prospects for the Wisconsin Badgers this season, and so much more. Always a great time whenever we get Ben aboard, and we always have to be checking out what we're all getting in terms of the Big Ten, as that conference preview is one of 3 that I have remaining to do, and that'll be coming up in the next few weeks. Have the Big Ten, the Big East, and the SEC coming up, so be all locked in on that. All the other conference previews, those have already been posted up, so we're getting you set for the upcoming college basketball season. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters M, name does not matter, so as per usual, please send these into the timeline, and the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire into whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Well, I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today. Everything is powered by EdgeBoost. Over at EdgeBoost, they're making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds whenever and wherever. With EdgeBoost, 100% of gambling transactions do get approved, and when you go to EdgeBoost.bet, utilize that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That'll give you a dollar for dollar match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's chat it up with our good friend Ben, a fellow Wisconsinite, much like myself, a man that's doing such great work on so many different fronts, and you're able to follow him on Twitter/X at his first name, Ben, and underscore his last name, Wilson, and then another underscore, and then the number 1 altogether. And Ben, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Hey, likewise, Greg. I mean, it's crazy. I think about the broadcast schedule, the season for college hoops. Like my first game, I have an exhibition in about a week, USC Loyola Marymount. Where did the time go? We've got the season almost about here. So thrilled to be back with you as always, and can't wait to get these games underway.
Yep, 4 weeks away from the start of the college basketball season. I know that you, much like myself, are enjoying some baseball in the meantime as well, but something that is not being enjoyed out there in the WAC is the fact that Billy Gillespie has been placed on leave, and I want to get your thoughts here because I was mentioning this on the podcast a day or two ago. I thought it was very intriguing that Tarleton State brought him back to start with because the interim coaching staff was doing such a good job 2 years ago. Tarleton State wins 25 games, and you're a guy that does a lot lot of WAC games when it comes to your broadcast schedule. So just take us through a little bit of Tarleton State and just what you make out of them right now, because honestly, I think a lot of people look at a coaching move like this as a bad thing, and it just doesn't feel like he got the most out of his players, and this might not be the world's worst thing for them.
Well, I can tell you just from being one of the main voices for the league and getting to know all the teams and the coaches. I mean, Tarleton, they were very close to the vest in everything they did. It was always, you never really felt like you had a sense of how things were being operated. And I think that was by design. I mean, Billy Gillespie, having at least interviewed him, talked to him, he's an old school, and as evidenced by the age and all the stops he's been to. He's kind of a throwback Renaissance man type of old school grinder coach. I don't think he really cares. He's never been shy about mincing words about expectations for players, and it might rub some people the wrong way in 2025 because that's not how the majority of coaches operate. But at least to give him credit, like, he's always been very authentic in how he has run things. And I have no insight personally into the allegations. Like, I know some of my coworkers in the WAC staff, they were just down in Stephenville doing interviews with him just a few days ago for media days, for preseason. So obviously this came out of nowhere. None of us had any idea about these allegations and anything like that. But I think the bigger picture here and the bigger thing at play for Tarleton is the fact that really their heart and soul, their absolute leader, who you could say was a big reason why Billy Gillespie, I think, came back to coach last year, was Freddie Hicks, who he convinced to transfer back to Tarleton. Like, how often do you ever see that? A guy who plays at one school, transfers out to go to his hometown school, in Freddie Hicks's case, Arkansas State, and then is convinced by the same coach to come back to the school he started. Now, that's how odd it was, and Hicks was a great player, 1,000-point scorer, but I mean, he did everything for them, offensively, defensively. Now he's gone, probably their best young player last year. They had Keaton Bristow, who's now off to Alabama, who's going to be a nice player for them. Boo Boo Benjamin's gone to George Washington. This was already one of the worst offenses in the country, Greg. I just don't know as good of a shot blocker, rim protector as Chris Mpaka is, and I'm a big fan of his. I just don't know where the offense is going to come from, and that has continued to be through not just the Billy Gillespie tenure, but for as long as I've been covering the league, the big issue for Tarleton, and it's hard to see that changing overnight.
Yep, and I think that it's going to be so interesting to see what we get, because now the interim coaching staff is going to be taking over, and you know this, Tarleton State has a very distinct style. They're looking to generate turnovers. They very much are built on defense. Offense has always been a little bit more optional, and I think that it is going to be interesting to see what style they play this year, because the interim coach is someone that was under the tutelage of Billy Gillespie for quite a while. I think that he was a assistant coach for him back when he was over at Kentucky as well, and I'm wondering if we're going to be getting the same style of Tarleton State, or if they might be trying something a little bit different.
And Glenn Cyprian, I don't know if it was up to him, he would want to completely follow that same style, because he's a guy who's been everywhere, and he has a really impressive resume. I mean, he's certainly, as far as associate head coaches go, and the stops he's been and the places he's coaches, is as impressive as about anybody, especially at the mid-major level. But like, he's been in the G League, he's been on NBA staffs, he's been at high major programs. I mean, I'm sure he would love, like, if he had the pieces, he would want to be running a little bit more, not playing as such a rough and tumble style. But I think sometimes, as we've seen, especially when you're a smaller school, limited NIL budget, you tend to be stuck with the sort of personnel and the team that you have. Really the thing that, outside of just the physical play for Tarleton, that I think has gotten them in trouble is because they've leaned into that so heavily, they are really injury prone compared to a lot of teams, not only in the WAC, but just around the country. And we saw how that played out last year. There were a lot of times throughout the regular season where they couldn't even dress 10 guys. They were borrowing grad assistants to put on the extra practice jersey, because it feels like an inevitable side effect when you play a style that egregious. And I certainly thought the WAC tournament game I called of theirs against California Baptist, that was kind of the microcosm of their season, where, I mean, they played their hearts out. They were so tough on defense, but they just couldn't buy a shot when they really needed it. And they lost that game 55-51. And you got to think a lot of their games this year will be played in the 50s to low 60s. And that's just kind of what you're getting. And it's going to take a lot outside of just, I think, a desire from a coaching staff to play differently, to completely overhaul when that mindset, that identity is so ingrained in that program.
Yep, exactly. And I think that it's going to be a very interesting season for Tarleton State, to say the least, as we do have our guy, Ben Wilson, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And how do you take a look at the landscape of the WAC? Because certainly when it comes to the WAC, I did not have Tarleton State number one in my projector or finish or anything like that. But the difference between 1 through 7 is not that great, because now you lose two of your top teams in Seattle, and Grand Canyon was always creme de la creme with regards to this conference. And when it comes down to it, you do have another team that forces a lot of turnovers in Abilene Christian. Utah Valley, I think, is going to be a very interesting team as well. And when I just take a look at the conference as a whole, I do think that it's going to be a lot of intrigue to see which team is able to get the NCAA tournament, because they are actually going to be playing each other 3 times this season.
Right. With how the league has been reduced, certainly a condensed schedule. I give Todd Phillips sort of the benefit of the doubt here. And I think you kind of have to have Utah Valley as your favorite going in. And it's a team that certainly they lost a lot. I mean, Dominic Nelson goes to Iowa State, Carter Wellings at Clemson, Tanner Toolson as well. He's gone. He initially was rumored to be staying in state, going to maybe BYU, but he's off at TCU now. So you think about your 3 leading scorers from a mid-major who are now playing at legitimate Power 4 type schools, and you figure we'll have big impacts there. It's a lot to replace, but also the cupboard seemed kind of bare last year for Utah Valley. And I mean, all they did was go 15-1 in league play. And I'm such a fan of Todd Phillips and what he does development-wise. And there's a reason why he was such a successful JUCO coach. It's one of those things, though, you're kind of having to have some blind faith, because it'll really be hard to get an idea of. And that's just the era we live in, right? With the transfer portal and the unknowns of putting these teams together. Guys like Dominic Nelson, Carter Welling, I think we knew them as probably solid, nice players for the mid-major level, but we didn't think they'd develop into the guys they did. And that's where you give so much credit to the coaching staff. So that's at least where I'd start. And so you've got to go with the team like Utah Valley, who in what is going to be the final year of the WAC, they have really been the one team that had just been tortured over and over in postseason play. They've just been the epitome of great regular season team, can never get over the hump in the tournament. And with this being the last year of the WAC as we know it, I mean, this would be the year, right, where they go all out and they load up for that one final push, get all of those past bad memories and kind of wear them out all in one tournament run. I think that's kind of the dream scenario here for Todd Phillips, and I at least would peg them to start at the top, but with the caveat of, with how much parity there is in this league, you could really point to 4 or 5 teams that you would not be shocked if they were live come tournament time.
Yep, exactly. And I do think that this is going to be a very intriguing year out there. And what else I think is going to be so intriguing as well is what we're going to be getting in the Big Ten as well. Myself and Ben are guys from the great state of Wisconsin. We talked about the WAC here in the first half of the podcast. So how about if we go from west to east and still talk a little bit about the West Coast teams like Oregon and what have you. We'll do that with Ben on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSIN Family Podcast.
Did you know your credit card points and miles can lose value to inflation? Credit card companies often reduce the redemption value of your points and miles. Now imagine a credit card with rewards that can grow in value. With the Gemini credit card, you can earn Bitcoin or one of over 50 other cryptos instantly with no annual fee. Every swipe at the store or gas pump earns you instant rewards deposited straight to your account. Plus, sign up now for a $200 Bitcoin bonus to kickstart your rewards. Visit Gemini.com/card today. Check out the link in the description for more information on rates and fees. Again, if you're looking to invest in Bitcoin but don't know where to start, the Gemini credit card makes it easy.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSIN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Ben Wilson. Does amazing work here at VSIN, does great work with his play-by-play work as he calls a lot of college basketball, some tennis, some indoor football. Man does it all. Follow him on the old Twitter/X at his first name Ben and _ last name Wilson, and then another _ and the number 1. And Ben, we talked about the WAC in the last segment. We're both guys from Wisconsin. How about if we now dive in on the Big Ten and what we can expect from this conference this season? How do you take a look at a Badgers unit that last season it was I would call it very good surprise what we were able to get out of John Tonji. They were able to make it to the NCAA tournament. They weren't playing as slow as molasses anymore, so that was something that we loved to see. But now it's year number 2. Are they going to be sticking with what they did last year or reverting back to the same old Wisconsin style? I think is a big question mark on a lot of people's minds.
All right, we were halfway through last season, and a lot of people were like, "Is this real? Or are we, in the middle of a dream? Do we need to be pinched? Like, what is going on here?" I think to start, the fact that John Blackwell, who was honorable mention All Big Ten, was a really good, I thought, complimentary piece for what they had in addition to John Tanji, coming back now as an upperclassman here. Is we always talk about, Greg, having to re-recruit your rosters, especially with guys who play really well and have solid seasons all around. I mean, that's a big first step for Greg Gard. And I mean, this was a team that was so good in the fundamentals you assume Wisconsin will be good in, right? Like best free throw shooting team in the country. But yeah, it was the pace. It was the 3-point shooting. I mean, 16th in 3-point rate. Those are the sorts of things you just, not that you wonder as far as will they try. I certainly think that Greg Gard, he's a very smart coach. He gets that you have to always adapt in the environment of college basketball, and he'll try to do the same thing. It's just, are you able to continue to supplement your roster with enough guys that can make that transition a reality and continue to be a team that is in the top 50 or so of 3-point distribution, right? And being comfortable with that being your identity. It's, I think, natural to have a healthy skepticism of saying, okay, well, one year was nice and Tanji kind of came out of nowhere, just had this explosionary senior season for the Badgers, as one of the best players in the country. Well, who is going to step up and lead, fill those shoes, which are awfully big? That, to me, is probably where you ask questions with Wisconsin, but you at least don't fault the path and the overall ideology of where they want that program to be.
Yep, exactly. And with Wisconsin, they were able to take some nice strides forward last year. And I think that you know this as well as I do, Ben. The middle of the Big Ten is always very, very wide. Typically, you've got those one or two top teams, and we do have that once again this year. Purdue feels like that clear number one. Michigan feels like that clear number two. But after that, I think that things are very wide open. Like, I have high expectations for Oregon, but now Jackson Shell said, we found out over the weekend that he has a broken hand, so that's going to be changing their outlook at the very least for non-conference play. Iowa, what we're going to be able to get out of the Ben McCollum era is going to be interesting, because that's an Iowa team that's going to be looking about as different as humanly possible for a team in this conference, so that'll be interesting. And then you've got the wild cards like Michigan State. You've got a team like in Illinois, and I do think that with regards to the Big Ten, the high level of play is certainly going to be there, and I do think that with regards to the middle, it's going to be interesting to see how it sorts itself out, because it feels like one or two bounces could be the difference between a team finishing, say, 4th or 5th to finishing 9th or 10th.
No doubt. I'm excited to see, I think I mentioned my first exhibition game will be seeing USC, and I'm really fascinated to see how that team looks. And like your two go-to guys last year, you each lose within the conference, right? And and Wesley Yates and then Desmond Claude both going to Washington. Like, on the surface, you think, wow, that's a big blow for Eric Musselman. He was just, you could kind of see the highs were really high last year for USC. The offense, I thought, was great, really impressive. They punched above their weight, but the lows were very low, and the defense struggled. It was a young team that struggled to find a way through that grind that is the Big Ten now, and all the travel, and we saw that manifest the way they really collapsed down the stretch. Losses in 6 of their last 7. Travel played a large role. So while that would seem negative in losing your two key guys, well, you're bringing in Elijah Arenas, who's a legit 5-star freshman, son of Gilbert Arenas. There is a lot of buzz about what he is bringing to the program. I can't wait to see him in person in about a week and a half and see how they'll look to integrate him. And anytime you're bringing in a former starter on a legit Final Four team, Chad Baker-Mazara comes from Auburn. I imagine he will be expected to lift a very heavy load. And for Eric Musselman, we never question the coaching chops, the acumen. He's always been awesome at development. This is a total wild card team, and it kind of reflects in a way, Greg, the Big Ten as a whole. I mean, you can kind of put, I would say, at least half the league into that wild card sort of ilk of, well, we can imagine a world in which this team is a second weekend tournament team. We can also imagine a sort of team where it's a 500 group and they're playing in the Crown tournament in Vegas come March.
Yep, exactly. And that's the fun of this entire conference, because there's just so many teams that it feels like it's a little bit jury's out on them. And is there maybe one or two of these teams that might be floating towards the middle in the Big Ten that you're feeling a little bit more bullish on? Because it feels like both of us are feeling relatively solid about Wisconsin, even though I don't think that they're going to be duplicating what they did last year. But it feels like in the Big Ten, there's a lot of teams that are like fringe top 25 teams, fringe top 30 teams. Is there one or two that you take a look at that you feel like could really surprise for this year?
Yeah, and it's funny, you brought up Oregon earlier, like the Dana Altman factor of it, and having called Oregon games, having kind of interviewed Altman and gotten to know him and being around the program. I remember at this time last year kind of thinking, oh man, like these guys on the roster, there were guys who a couple of years ago were, bench warmers and weren't really playing. And in today's day and age of college hoops, is that really a path towards success? And all they do and go out is just, they develop Nate Biddle, TJ Bamba, and they just absolutely roll after, they had their, mid-season Big Ten swoon like it seemed like every West Coast Big Ten team did. And they go on a nice run. They end up as a 5 seed. And I look at that as kind of the blueprint, too, for a team like Oregon, who probably from a coaching perspective are as good, as well-equipped as anybody to handle the gauntlet that is the Big Ten. So I imagine Oregon, I don't think there'll be a ton of buzz. I haven't heard a lot on them coming into this year. I think more people are focused on the football team and how good Dante Moore looks right now. But that's a group that I've learned to never doubt. I really wonder now that Dana Altman, who's been so ahead of the curve in a lot of things coaching-wise, he's had a year under his belt in the Big Ten, had a chance to better optimize the scheduling and the travel, how that will look and manifest for a Ducks team that might not look super stacked on paper, but we've learned over the years not to doubt that, especially going into a season when we don't have any data on it.
Yep, I am so in agreement with you there. And with Oregon, they had a big giant shift last year going from the Pac-12 on over to the Big Ten where there's so much travel. And we did see a lot of those West Coast teams really struggle in year number one in the Big Ten. Do you think that with just a year under their belt that these teams out there on the West Coast like Washington, USC, UCLA, that they're going to be a little bit more equipped to be a bit more competitive in the Big Ten this year rather than last year?
Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily a huge 0 to 100 thing where all of a sudden you're going to see like Mick Cronin, wearing the Big Ten hat or drinking the Kool-Aid of, oh yeah, these trips are awesome, and teams are, going to College Park and playing a noon Eastern tip and just dominating and running those teams out of the building. I don't think it'll be at all like that. I just think it's more of and we saw like how many of those teams lost, 4 in a row, 5 in a row when they had the 4 road games in 5 and it was all East Coast. And it felt like no matter how much you talked about it or schemed it in advance, there was just nothing those teams could do to prevent that from happening because no college team had ever had to do that before. I just think we'll probably see somewhat of regression toward the mean, and it probably goes vice versa. Like for the Eastern Central Time teams having the 11 p.m. Eastern tips out at the Galen Center or in Westwood, I think it goes both ways. And I think it was a great angle for us to take advantage of as bettors. I think like with anything, when it's new and it's something you can expose as a bettor, that probably goes away over time. And I'm thinking that'll probably be somewhat of the story, at least for this year and going forward, as far as that Big Ten scheduling goes.
No question about it. It's going to be such a fun year out there in the Big Ten. It's going to be intriguing to see what we get out of the WAC this year. And Ben, I know you're going to have your finger on the pulse of it all. You do great work here at VSIN. You do such great work with your play-by-play work and so much more. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you. I know people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Hey, appreciate it as always, Greg. Ben _Wilson_1. And for me, at least college hoops wise, first exhibition game a week from Saturday. So that'll be fun. USC, Loyola Marymount. And then I'm doing a lot of G League basketball work with the NBA this year, in addition to WAC games. So it's our final year of the WAC as we know it. So I'm just going to try to enjoy it from start to finish.
Absolutely. And Ben, he does such an incredible job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Does a great job on the baseball front and so much more. And every single time he joins me, lends such great insight. So big thanks to Ben for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSIN family of podcasts. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, there's the name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. I am with you guys every single day on this podcast, regular season and off season. We are up to over 2,100 straight days without a missed podcast. Like I said in segment number 1, we are down to just 3 conference preview podcasts remaining, and we're down to just 4 weeks until the start of the college basketball season. And once that college basketball season starts, you're getting picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. We're getting closer and closer, so appreciate tuning in today. I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.